My documents up. Give me just 1 second. All right, there we go. All right, Secretary, if you're ready to go, I can call us to order at 1:01 p.m. This is Wednesday, April 28th. Just calling to order the Maryland Higher Education Commission, our monthly meeting. Just want to welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I hope folks continue to be in good health and good spirits as we're returning to something slowly that's approximating normal. With spring and summer around the corner, it seems like we are turning the corner here, so best to you all. I don't have anything else in terms of remarks. Secretary Fielder, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon. The first thing to do is all of you saw circulated yesterday the settlement papers for the coalition case, and I want to say right up front, thank you. Some of you have been on this case longer than others, but for me, it's been 6 years. For the state, it's been 15 years. And as you saw from Jennifer's email, the settlement agreement has been fully executed by all parties and was filed with the district court last night, meaning that the Brian Frosch, Attorney General for Maryland, signed also. And the next proceedings are all related to the Court of Appeals and remanding it back so that we can set forth that this conditional settlement agreement fully cures any Maryland policy of unnecessary program duplication that was traceable to de jure segregation, which thereby fully and finally resolves the above captioned lawsuit. This is a tremendous step forward in resolving this coalition's lawsuit. I really appreciate each and every one of your work on this. It's been, quite a journey, and one that has glad to at least be this far along in the settlement. A couple other quick things. At our last meeting, we talked about this establishing of a diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee of the commission, which we're still working forward. We did have our third go-to meeting, full staff, facilitated diversity, equity, and inclusion discussion just a week ago. And Commissioners Boyd and Coleman, thank you for attending that. We did have some good engagement across with over 50 people attending and participating, so that's another very good step. And as you've probably seen and heard in the news, MHEC is playing a leading role thanks to the academic program area primarily, and Debbie Ng, in coordinating MaxVax site university days. The outreach here is to try to get every university employee, faculty, student, and staff vaccinated.
Your phone is on the computer.
Pardon? Okay, the only thing that we're starting to consider now is for those out-of-state students and international students that will be returning during the summer months to Maryland that maybe didn't get their fully vaccination or second shot, is that we set up a MaxVax and coordinate that so we can make sure we get everybody coordinated. That concludes, Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks.
Okay, just a process question. Thank you to you and your team and for the commission members who were willing to join the DEI committee. I know some of you are spread thin. I should probably, according to bylaws, appoint at some point an official chairman or chairwoman, a chair of that committee. So we don't need to do that now, but if those of you who are participating want to have a discussion and nominate or force somebody to do it, please let me know just so we can make that official, hopefully before the next meeting. I don't think anything else is needed on that now. We can talk about the other committee updates along the agenda. Okay, so public comment is next, and I was made aware that we have 4 people signed up for public comment. Dr. Andrea Backman, Megan Jackson, Lisa Sincere, and Andy Burnmeister. So just as a reminder, each speaker has up to 3 minutes to deliver their testimony, and they can submit in writing as well. And this is an opportunity for the public to provide testimony on matters that are important to them and to the commission. Commission members can take into consideration everything that has been said to them, but our process is to consider and then discuss, debate any of those kind of items at the proper moment in the agenda when the particular agenda item is coming up for discussion. So my understanding is that there is a PowerPoint presentation involved. So in my list, Dr. Backman is first. So let me call on you. And once you're ready, I can start your clock at 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Smerek. Actually, unfortunately, Dr. Backman had an unexpected conflict arise, and she will not be joining us today. And it will actually just be Ms. Jackson and myself that will be presenting.
Very good. Okay, so would you like me to recognize you? I think that was Ms. Sincere?
Yes.
Okay, tell me when you're ready and your 3 minutes will begin. And I assume you have control over your PowerPoint?
I do, yes, and I am just getting it all set on the screen right now. So I'm ready to go.
All right, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Make sure that, perfect, okay. Good afternoon, Chair Smerek, Commission members, Secretary Fielder, and MHEC staff. For the record, my name is Lisa Sincere, and I'm Associate General Counsel for Strayer University. I am joined today in making public comment by Strayer's General Counsel, Megan Jackson, and our Director of Government Affairs, Andrew Burmeister, is also present. Thank you once again for the opportunity to provide comments on Strayer's request for an institutional waiver from the definition of full-time faculty member requirements. We certainly appreciate the careful consideration the Commission has undergone in reviewing this request. The primary determination currently before the Commission is whether the university's unique role, scope, and mission merit a waiver of the full-time faculty requirements as defined in the Code of Maryland Regulations. We appreciate the Commission's clarification of how it defines uniqueness, and we maintain that our submissions have clearly outlined that under the Commission's definition, our role, scope, and mission are unique enough to merit a waiver of the full-time faculty requirements. In all events, no other institution in Maryland is contributing to the education of adult learners in the same way as Strayer through our demographics and broader open access than community colleges. While other institutions may have goals of expanding access to underserved populations, when you look at the data, we are actually doing this and at the highest rate of all institutions in Maryland. Further, Strayer is the only institution operating in Maryland that currently holds the basic Carnegie classification of special focus 4-year business and management schools. We recognize that other institutions have been granted the waiver and have subsequently ceased operations in Maryland. However, we shouldn't categorically be viewed as an institution that has made the same operational decisions. After almost 130 years of educating students in Maryland, we believe it's clear we have established that our commitment to educating Marylanders is not fleeting or operationally driven. We are motivated by the opportunity to make high-quality post-secondary education accessible to adults of diverse backgrounds. As you can see, this hasn't changed from what we communicated to students and the public in Strayer Business College's 1912 catalog. To be entrusted with the privilege of educating Marylanders by students, the Commission, and the Middle States Commission on Higher Education is not something we take lightly. Even though there are other institutions in Maryland that now serve similar populations of students, we have not only demonstrated that we serve these populations at a higher rate, but we've also demonstrated our consistent, unwavering dedication to the success of these students through our trusted reputation and our depth of experience in serving the unique needs of these students.
Good afternoon, Chair Smerek, Commission members, Secretary Fielder, and Commission staff. As Lisa mentioned before, my name is Megan Jackson and I serve as General Counsel for University. I'd just briefly like to highlight that our institution's mission rests on a foundational truth that the decisions we make are rooted in what is in the best interest of our students and not our operational motivations. We have a strong full-time faculty and adjunct faculty base. And if granted the waiver, this will not mean that the commission has prioritized an operational agenda over quality or the best interest of students. Indeed, we feel quite the opposite. We simply would not be able to carry out our mission without the support of our faculty, regardless of whether a faculty member is full-time or adjunct. They are held to the same standards of excellence in instruction and student engagement. In fact, we believe that our adjuncts' ability to incorporate real-time professional experience not only enhances the student experience, but that it's in line with our mission to be able to offer instruction to the very students for which Maryland seeks to preserve educational access. This not only enhances the student experience, but it fortifies our ability to carry out our mission, and it's necessary for preparing our adult learners from underrepresented backgrounds for a rapidly evolving and competitive job market. In closing, on behalf of the university, we would like to thank each of you for the opportunity to comment today. We are grateful for the work that you all are doing in supporting all of our students, and we look forward to providing any additional information that you may need as you continue to review our request. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I appreciate that. Is Mr. Burnmeister also speaking, or was it just the two of you?
It is just the two of us today speaking, and Mr. Burmeister is just present on the call.
Very good, thank you. I and the rest of the commission members appreciate that. Okay, next on the agenda is the commission minutes approval. So you have 3 sessions before you, the March 24, April 9, and then the April 9 separate closed sessions. So if you want to take a moment to take a look at that, otherwise I will entertain a motion to approve, and we can do it en masse, all 3 together. Would anybody like to approve the minutes? To move to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Yeager, I move that we go ahead and approve all 3 sets of minutes.
Commissioner Yeager, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
Commissioner Burrell, I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Burrell, thank you for the second. Okay, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to approve the 3 sets of minutes, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Excellent. Very good. I appreciate that. All approved unanimously. All right. Commissioner committee updates. DEI, I think we already addressed that, unless Secretary Fielder, you have anything else to say. Next would be, if you don't mind, let's skip Education Policy Committee, Chairman Yeager, because we can come back to that at the end, because we'll move next to your session. Outreach Grants Financial Assistance Committee, the chair is Commissioner Jackson. Any updates?
Yes, we do have an update. Good afternoon, everyone. We had a meeting on March the 29th, and I wanted to thank our commissioners, James Coleman and Sydney Miller, for participating in this meeting, along with MHAC staff, Donna Thomas and Vinay Edwards. As you all know, the goals of the Outreach Grants and Financial Assistance Committee are to study Maryland's grants and financial aid programs and MHAC's administration of these programs, to recommend changes to better serve the purposes of those programs and their efficient administration, and then to recommend strategies for improving the public awareness of financial aid opportunities, the value of a post-secondary education, and MHAC's mission, operations, and services. So the committee would like to briefly update you on the achievement of these goals. The MHAC staff continue to deliver creative and efficient strategies to maintain public awareness of MHAC's programs and services, particularly during this pandemic season. At the end of February, a new electronic file upload tool was implemented, which streamlined the process for students to upload documents and receive notifications of uploads. There was increased outreach efforts to high schools, which resulted in more traction, high schools opting in to use the GPA upload tool, which was rolled out last year. And by MHEC keeping its webpage current, which is very important in days like these, and through greater utilization of text messaging, students and families are receiving more real-time information about state and programs and deadlines, state aid programs and deadlines. Also through MSDE, with that relationship, information about scholarships and via newsletters and one-pagers continue to go out. And to date, 45 virtual presentations, we're talking about webinars and PowerPoint presentations, have been delivered to high school students via their schools and faith-based and other nonprofit organizations. And additional training has reached not only target audience students, but parents and counselors. With all of these successes, and I have to tell you, they are phenomenal, and I just want to continue to compliment our staff for their valiant efforts, particularly during the season. We became aware of one particular challenge, and I think it's a challenge that many institutions are facing. This massive virtual environment limits the ability of staff to track the total number of persons participating virtually. Now, obviously, a remedy is to have registrations, but then that would really probably limit the access that we would like to see in getting information out. So I think they're doing a commendable job. I want to give kudos to the MHEC staff for a job well done, and thank them so much for making themselves available, as well as Commissioners Coleman and Miller. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great report. Any questions, comments, Secretary Fielder or commissioners? Okay. If not, we can move on to Finance and Operations Committee. Vice Chair Mitchell.
Good afternoon. I don't have anything to report at this moment. We are still open to having people to join. As you know, the Finance Committee was chaired by Commissioner McFarland, and also the other member has also left. So we're kind of certainly looking for individuals to join and support the Finance Committee. I'm hoping that with this settlement going on, that there's going to be some additional staffing requirements. And as you know, part of the Finance Committee is to provide support, I'll say, to the overall MHEC budget. So maybe we can participate, and support in some way in that area. So that's all I have for now.
Very good. And I did briefly talk to Secretary Fielder about this, that assuming this legislation moves forward and everything with the lawsuit continues apace, that there will be discussions about the new staff members and how the commission can play into that. For example, the legislation discusses oversight and administration. So I know many commission members will be interested in that. So your committee, if nothing else, can help lead the charge and help organize our thinking about that. So thank you greatly. Unless there are any other questions or comments about that, we can just move on to the Education Policy Committee. And Commissioner Yeager, if you have any other updates, great. If not, we can just transition into your report from the committee's work on the Strayer University waiver request.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So what I'll do is, actually, the majority of our last couple of meetings has been focused on the for the exception. So what I'd like to do is just a few fundamental comments, then I'll make a motion, and then we can have further discussion on it. So I think if we go back, their request is to have a waiver for not having a number of faculty members. So really go back to why is that regulation in there to begin with? And it's really to protect the students and ensure that the students are exposed to a coherent curriculum, as well as great advice from the professors. And when you put together a curriculum, it really falls on the the responsibility of the full-time faculty members. When they put it together, they know what lesson is next, what's around the corner, and really give you a better experience because they put it together so they know what's there. And then it's up to them to help mentor the adjunct faculty who aren't there, didn't have that opportunity. And this really falls on them a lot to the students look to the full-time faculty and adjunct faculty for advice as well. And so if you get below like a certain percentage, then that exposure to a coherent curriculum really is in jeopardy. And so in able to qualify for waiver, you really need to have someone with something with a unique role, scope, and mission. And finally, the other point, from the presentation, we saw that they referred to the underrepresented in the slide, but talked about the underserved. And that's really what's at the bottom line here is how are we serving this underserved population? What are the services? Are we giving them a coherent curriculum? And are we giving them great advice as we go through? So that's why there's a very, very detailed summary of our meetings and what all the analysis that has gone into it. And so at this time, I move that the commission deny Strayer University of the definition of full-time faculty as provided for in the Maryland Higher Education Commission's requirements for authorization of out-of-state degree granting institutions to operate in Maryland. I'll wait for a second and then we can open it up for discussion.
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Mitchell. So open to discussion, particularly maybe to kick off, were there any other members of the committee, thank you again for all of the time you spent going through these documents and in the discussions, who would like to add anything to Chairman Yeager's very good comments? Okay, Dr. Dow, is there anything else that we ought to add to the mix? Again, thank you to you and your team for the many hours of work you put into this.
I appreciate that. No, not at this time. I think the memo provides the information that we have provided to the Education Policy Committee. Thank you, but I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any other question, comment from any of the members of the commission, and certainly Secretary Fielder, if you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything additional. I just want to thank the staff have spent a tremendous amount of time reviewing the multiple submissions that have and documents that have come in from Strayer, and I appreciate their two presentations to the commission. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. One last chance in case anybody wants to say anything. Otherwise, I will call for a vote.
Mr. Smith, Chuck McDaniels, I just wanted to thank Mr. Yeager for explaining the rationale around the requirement for full-time instructors. My thought was also in what he made, part of the uniqueness that Strayer mentioned was how they uniquely serve the underserved community. And those students probably benefit greatly from having a college education. But looking at it through an equity lens, those students probably need the greatest amount of support and the greatest structure than maybe some other students. And if that is their uniqueness, it certainly doesn't seem like we would want to compromise in any way, which they say that having less full-time instructors doesn't compromise, but hearing the rationale as to why that requirement is there, it doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
Thank you, Commissioner McDaniels. Anyone else? Okay, given the motion and the second on the table, let me just call the question then. So all in favor of the motion, which is to support the committee's recommendation, which is to deny the waiver request. All in favor of that, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. Thank you again to Dr. Dow and her team and Chairman Yeager for he and the committee, all of the work that they did on this. It is greatly appreciated. Okay, Secretary Fielder, over to you. I think the next is Department of Academic Affairs with Dr. Dow.
Dr. Dow.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gordon McCowan. She will do the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. This presentation is in regards to the Collegium Sanctorum Anglorum application. In accordance with the Code of Maryland Regulations, COMAR 13B 0202, the Maryland Higher Education Commission has reviewed a Stage 1 initial application for a certificate of approval of an in-state degree granting institution submitted by the Collegium, which further will be known as the Collegium. It's located at 36 South Potomac Street, Suite 203 in Hagerstown, Maryland. That is the main office. The application includes a proposal to offer the following 3 programs. And I'm going to stop here. I forgot to mention I'm on page 23 of the commission book. The 3 programs are the Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts, an upper division certificate in theology and philosophy, a lower division certificate in studies in English and Latin. Dr. Edward Schaefer, president, was informed on April 2nd, 2021, that the Collegium is approved to proceed to Stage 2 of the application process. This decision was based on an analysis of the application in conjunction with the Maryland Higher Education Commission's minimum requirements for an in-state degree granting institution, the Maryland State Plan for Post-Secondary Education, and a 30-day review by the Maryland Higher Education community. No comments or objections were received during the 30-day circulation period. A Stage 2 application was received on April 15, 2021, and is currently under review by MHEC staff. If the documentation submitted by the Collegium it satisfies the requirements of the Stage 2 application, an evaluation team will be appointed to conduct an on-site visit to the institution to ensure that the institution complies with the regulations. If based on the evaluation team report and other available information, the Secretary is satisfied that the prospective in-state institution is in compliance with COMAR and the minimum requirements are met, the Secretary shall grant approval to operate. If the Secretary is not satisfied that the prospective in-state institution is in compliance with this chapter, the Secretary shall issue a notice of deficiencies and deny approval to the institution. If approved, an institution's first year If approved, an evaluation team will conduct an on-site visit to the in-state institution at the end of the institution's first instructional year to ensure that the institution is in compliance with COMAR and any other condition upon which the commission based the institution's approval to operate. That's the end of my report, and this report is for informational purposes only. Are there any questions, comments?
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Yes, Secretary Fielder, anything to add, or commission members, questions, comments?
Just
I would just add that this has been a very aggressive schedule that Ed Schaefer has put in place to try to open this institution. And he has, as part of the application, the second part, application 2, filed the necessary proof of facility acquisition, financial proof, and those types of things, which we are continuing to review. So his part 2 is complete and submitted, but it's still under review. And we are seeing some interest from local elected officials and the House of Delegates in support of this institution.
Thank you.
So I have a curiosity question, Trish, and that, and I mean, I'm fine with the whole report. But can you say a little bit about the mission of the institution? I mean, it seems to be a very specifically focused institution.
Yeah. Yes, I think that we can forward as appropriate the written mission that they provided to us, but basically it's to be very conservative, and that might be, and Dr. Dow can correct me if there's a better word than conservative Catholic traditional education, with the use of Latin, prayer, uniforms, residence, dining, all prescribed under the roof of this university, which will start with a very small enrollment recruited from Catholic high schools, I believe is the main thrust of where this is.
Good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, next up, thank you again for the presentation. Next is Office of Research and Policy Analysis, Dr. Schwartz.
Good afternoon, thank you all. Good to see all of you despite being on small screens. It's good to be with everybody again. I'm Dr. Barbara Schwartz, Director of Research and Policy Analysis for the Commission, and I have two reports to present to you, and both are action items. So I see from this feature, I believe I can share my screen. Give me a moment and let me, can you all see the enrollment projection slide?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to keep my remarks brief and leave questions, time for questions at the end. You can find the enrollment projections memo on page 24 of the Commission book. And of course, Debbie was so kind as to pass on the projections memo and the projections report itself. So you had that in advance of the meeting. So I'm going to keep a few highlights on this. So as I said, on page 24 of the Commission book. So regulation states that the Commission shall establish annually, the underlined section there is the pieces of regulation that are tied to these projections, that we will establish enrollment projections to be used by each college to prepare capital construction projects. And as you can see from point C there, the key being it's a 10-year projection. So our commitment to the institutions is to put forward an annual report every year that gives them a basis for that 10th year being the significant year that they want as a measure for estimating individuals to be using up space for capital projects. So as I stated, you have an enrollment projections report that you had a chance to review. For a bit of history, for those who are newer to the Commission and newer to this report, it is a report based on a series of approximately 65 regression equations. The model relies on a series of data points that are brought into the model over a course of sequences to build this 10-year projection. We have been utilizing the same model since the 1990s. And what this slide summarizes, and again, the report itself summarizes, is assumptions in the model. And I'm only going to call attention to a few of the items as they pertain to our the sort of action before you and the decisions that we made as an agency this year. So as you can see, one of the key pieces of the model is around enrollment. More significantly for this year's model would have been fall 2020 enrollment, which we all know was deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. You can also see that we utilize a full-time undergraduate attendance estimate using high school graduates and projections of high school graduates. We also utilize a relationship between full-time enrollment at public four-year institutions and enrollment patterns at the community colleges, seeing causal relationships between how a set of students might disperse themselves over the state. Tuition plays a part in the model, as well as aspects of per capita disposable income and non-credit enrollment. So this table and the materials that you received summarized, it was a sort of an attachment that had shades of yellow. You can see on the left column, the contemporary variables that we speculated were affected by COVID-19 that would go into the model for this year, which included the fall 2020 headcount and full-time equivalent enrollment at Maryland colleges and public colleges and universities. Tuition and fees, which were very much I believe almost all institutions stayed flat, or a few actually decreased their tuition and fees, and then a few community colleges took theirs up. Non-credit enrollment and 2020 credit hours and full-time equivalents. So the older variables that go into the model were things like population projections, which I believe had dates as recent as 2019, high school projections, which were put out right before COVID-19, and so therefore possibly a bit optimistic about high school completion, and statewide per capita income. So these would have all gone into the model, and upon discussions internally and with our stakeholders, such as the Department of Budget and Management and the Department of Legislative Services, as well as bringing this forward to Segmental Advisory Council and briefly consulting our Education Policy Committee for the Commission, it was our recommendation that we hold steady last year's enrollment projections figures as the basis for this year's. And so what that will allow us to do is still fulfill our regulatory responsibility, provide institutions and the state a stable 10-year projection, allow for pre-COVID data analysis to be used with the assumption that that pre-COVID data may be more indicative of normalcy, and of course addresses the complications we would have had with introducing the variables that would have been affected by COVID and not affected by COVID into the regression model this year. So this slide just gives you an example of what that actually will look like, and is in the report that was shared with you that you'll be taking a motion on today. And as you can see from those latter two columns, all we literally did was repeat the figures from fall 29 or fiscal year 30, yet another year. And those two asterisks are tied to a footnote that appears on every the bottom of every significant page, sort of a total or subtotal page, indicating and signaling to a user of the data that the data are indeed meant to be identical, and referring to the decision that we've made, put forth in our recommendation this year. So before I take questions, I just want to request, as recommended, that the Maryland Higher Education Commission accept the 2021 to 2030 enrollment projections and approve their distribution to the public, the campuses, and interested state agencies. And I can now take questions if you'd like.
Very good, thank you. Questions?
Commissioner Yeager here. So are the 2020 census, does that give any input at all to your enrollment projections? Maybe you covered it and I missed it.
So the census data will eventually be used by the Department of Planning. So when I cite the population projections and the population data, I know from our use of the Maryland Department of Planning's data, they rely on the census as one part of that model. You can well imagine with the complications coming out with the 2020 census data just being distributed, even if it weren't controversial, right? It could be a while before those data are worked into their model. I wouldn't expect, so usually they put out population projections in the summer or fall of a given year. We might not see that new 2020 census data incorporated into a 2021 data point, and it may actually ripple out to 2022. But we just receive the data when it comes publicly available, if that makes sense. So it does, to answer your question, Commissioner Yeager, in short, yes, the census data is taken into account, not specifically in our model. It's sort of a byproduct.
Got it. Thank you very much.
I don't have a question about the methodology at all, Dr. Schwartz, and I do have a question, and I'm hoping I read it correctly. When I looked at the projections, it looks like BCCC has probably one of the largest percentage increases projected. And I'm just wondering if you have any understanding of what's driving that relative to the others.
Truth be told, I could not speak to probably any specific institution, but I'm happy to look more closely at the baseline data that we would have put into the model last year to see what might be triggering. You say it's Baltimore City Community College?
Yeah, it was just a curiosity question for me. Is I tried to look at what was happening over a 10-year period at the institutions. That one seems to be a higher percentage increase than most of the others, if I'm reading it correctly. So if you have any clarification, want to just shoot me an email, that'd be great.
Sure. Yes, I'd be happy to.
Dr. Schmerz, I'm impressed with the information that you've given us and the method by which the model is going to be adjusted to make some sense about what happened during the period that we've all lived through. But I also am wondering, will some energy go into preserving exactly what happened during this COVID situation with the institutions, just for information so we can be clear what the real impact was?
Was the word you used preserving, as in
yes.
Capturing?
Yes.
Do you mean specifically through this projections model, or more broadly will we be doing data collections that
more broad, just more broadly, so that we get a sense of what the impact has been?
There is no one collection that will probably allow us to do that, so much as we will see them affect a number of collections, as well as some of the narrative reports that we receive. But I am not aware of at this time at MHEC any other means by which we do so. But I agree with you that institutions, I think, are hungry to, as you may have seen through some of the performance accountability submissions that came in the narrative reports. I think they're eager to share their story of how the pandemic affected them and their response to it. So I certainly see room for it, but I can't speak to a particular vehicle right now.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Boyd, if I can also add to those comments, we've had a number of internal discussions on a variety of specific data elements, trying to decide if we need to maintain consistency with specific variables or if we need to make adjustments in light of COVID. And we've been working to be intentional about those decisions, about the longitudinal nature of those variables, but also being able to account for impact around COVID. So Dr. Schwartz has issued out several guidance documents to the campuses on these kinds of very detailed issues around specific variables, things like distance ed, other elements. But so know that we are being thoughtful about finding ways to both capture the impact of COVID, but also understand that this is kind of a blip in time and not revamp our entire sets of collections just because COVID is happening. So it's a bit of a balance, but we're happy to provide additional information.
Thank you for that information. It really is fascinating. It's an opportunity to learn from this blip going forward. So I appreciate the extra effort that's going in to capture that.
It actually, Dr. Dow's comments remind me that one of the very specific ways, Commissioner Boyd, that we will be doing this is the financial aid collection. We have created specific temporary financial aid categories so that we can ensure the cleanest capture of CARES money. There likely may have been institutional level scholarships that may have been created either through philanthropy or other funds. And so they, instead of them getting bled into lots of other existing aid categories where we would lose our ability to peek inside, we've, I think much to the sort of chagrin of some of our institutions, created just, and we did this on the fly really last year at this time, not knowing what federal distributions would look like, what state support would look like, what would be going on at the community level. Maybe 17 different COVID-related buckets of financial aid, so that we would be able to see, which I think will serve. Now, the problem with our financial aid collection is, of course, it's a bit delayed. We let for the books to close every year, and then we collect it the following fall. So it's going to be a bit. I think that the one piece I would say to the commissioners is please be patient as we try to unpack it. To Dr. Dow's point, some of what we're doing is very contemporary, and we're trying to pivot and respond. But we just, for example, received maybe 2 weeks ago the fall 2020 enrollment file. So just due to the nature of how our data gets processed and cleaned. And so we're always in a bit of a lag compared to what we'd like to see. So, but I know that you're committed, Commissioner Boyd, and I'm excited when I'll finally be able to tell you some information and data on what you've asked.
Thank you for that information.
Sure. Other questions about this report in particular? Then I have, if there are no others, then there's an action item that you're.
Yes, so I think you need a motion for us to approve this so you can press ahead with it.
Chairman, I so move, Commissioner Boyd.
Great, Commissioner.
I'll second it.
Was that Commissioner Serkan?
Here's Mary Pat. Yep.
Very good. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I think we've had discussion. Is there any other question or comment? All right, if not, everyone in favor of the motion to proceed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Thank you. All right, Dr. Schwartz, you have one more?
Report. I got one more. No slides though, so this will just be me, very brief. I'd like to make a few remarks. This is on page 27 of your commission book, is the memo for the Performance Accountability Report. And of course, similar to the distribution of the enrollment projections, I gave you quite a tome, a 302-page document, I believe, that is the compilation of the Performance Accountability Reports for the institutions. So I want to leave time again for questions. This is, of course, another action item, but I wanted to highlight for those who are less familiar, the Performance Accountability Report process that you have before you is an annual process, and it allows the institutions to fulfill a number of requirements to a number of stakeholders. So it allows the institutions to report on the progress tied to their mission, their vision, and their strategic plans and goals, as well as the Maryland State Plan for Post-Secondary Education. So where this crosses many, kind of checks a lot of boxes, is this is, of course, a report that institutions bring forward to their boards, their governing bodies, as well as for the public 4 years. It is a set of documents that they bring forward to the Department of Budget and Management, and is tied to their Managing for Results process. So institutions are given latitude to set goals, benchmarks and goals that are tied to their particular unique mission and strategic plans. So what we try to hold them accountable to is progress towards those benchmarks and goals. And you can well imagine that, as you learned through looking at the report and the memo, this was a report written sort of by two very different points in time. The institutions were reporting on their fall 19 experiences, as well as their spring 2020. And as I emphasized in my report, many of them took an opportunity to comment out about the initial effects of COVID. So this does mean that next year's report, which will be submitted next fall, and then I'll summarize for you. Well, actually, I won't summarize for you. This is a responsibility of the Associate Director. I'm currently wearing my Associate Director hat. So if all goes well, I will be having a new Associate Director in the near future, and he or she will be presenting on this. But all to say, we bring this before you every year. The summary report I provided was quite brief, with an emphasis that the power of this report really lies in the institutional narratives that fall behind it. The strength, kind of back to Commissioner Boyd's remarks and questions, it is a window into their own journey through COVID, and really on a much more dull year, which we would all like to have back. just a reflection of their progress towards their goals and their mission and how they're doing and setting their benchmarks and so forth. I will emphasize that institutions showed that through their materials that they worked tirelessly to maintain academic quality of their programs and protecting the health and safety of their campus communities. I look forward to their upcoming submissions to learn more about how they've continued to put forward new ideas and solutions to the challenges that lie ahead, certainly for them. So before I take questions on the accountability report, I do want to recommend that the Maryland Higher Education Commission approve the 2020 Performance Accountability Report and ask the Secretary to forward it to the Governor and the General Assembly as required by law. And again, I'll take questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments? I only have one, and it's kind of conceptual, but I want to make sure that I understand the process first. So I assume a statute of the legislature requires annually these institutions to do this kind of report. They come to us, we collate them, and then we end up by law sending them to the General Assembly and the Governor. If that's right, are all of the reports or all of the contents of each institution reports solely self-reported? Do they have to hire an external entity to do the reports, or is it just the administration reporting on itself?
So I'll start with the first part of your question, which is the statute there is nothing in regulation or statute that talks about the true manner in which the submissions occur. So it is more broadly stated as an annual process, and that we as an agency are tasked with holding institutions accountable. So what that can look like could vary, not vary as in vary year to year, but we as an agency have worked with the institutions with this model and this format of institutional benchmarks and the marriage of tying it to the managing for results process have happened over time. So happy to talk a bit more about the kind of historic background that leads us to today. So we've decided I inherited this, but it was decided by entities that this kind of narrative report, due to the diversity of missions and the tasks and the sort of the charge that is part of this regulation, this fits, it sort of checks all the boxes and allows institutions, to your point, to then craft the narrative report that they want to put forward. So unlike a fiscal audit, there is no third party that's brought in to write this for them or to check their numbers to ensure that they're all measuring things the exact same way, all reporting things the exact same way, or even internally within an institution, correct, for lack of a better word. It's not like somebody's testing to make sure if they reported a retention rate of 82.2, that somebody comes in who is independent of the institution to say that is or is not correct. I assume that's kind of where you were thinking, was it's kind of an external consulting group that might come in and
right. Right. I was just curious if like the accountability was self-reporting or there was some sort of third-party entity who had some sort of autonomy to make the kind of independent judgments that we might find valuable.
Yes. Now, I think that the checks and balances in that, of course, the board, the governing bodies are the first and approving audience for this. And so my understanding from talking to the institutions and why they find this process valuable is because it is a conversation starter and an annual cycle with their boards. And then, of course, the Department of Budget and Management, I think, holds the public 4 years in particular to their goals and does read over their lines and say, well, you said you were going to do this by 2022, but here we are at 2022 and you've not met that goal. Why is that going on?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. I don't think we yet have a motion and second, or did I lose track?
I did not hear a motion or second.
Okay, so can we have a motion along the lines of that we are approving the performance reports and asking the secretary to forward it to the governor and general assembly? Can I have a motion along those lines?
Yes, Commissioner Yeager, I recommend that I move that we approve the 2020 Performance Accountability Report and ask the secretary to forward it to the governor and the general assembly as required by law.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Yeager, is there a second?
I second. This is Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson with the second. All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Excellent. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Schwartz. We appreciate all of your work on this. And I went through the reports, and I learned a lot. I can only imagine how much work this was for you and your team, so thank you. I don't have anything else left on the agenda. Secretary Fielder, is there anything else we ought to cover?
Oh, I really appreciate everybody's attention again today, and we will be monitoring. When I say we, Jennifer Katz and myself, monitoring the progress along on the settlement agreement and the court filings, and so we will, as there's steps are made along the way that are appropriate, we'll share those with you. And as you've already remarked, for the Finance Subcommittee, as part of the commission, when we get out probably 18 months from now, and we'll be adding the 10 new staff members in academic affairs. I mean, it's spelled out in the legislation. You know, we'll have to take a look at, and we've already started the internal discussions, how do we set up the structure, you know, of the individuals, you know, who's going to be doing what. We do expect to see a significant increase in academic program requests from each of the HBCUs, all 4 of them. We have not received that, but we have kind of seen the note that we should expect them. So we're very mindful of to plan it forward, but we can't hire the people until the governor funds, which is fiscal year 23. So July of 22. So we've got a few months, but at the same time, it's worth considering now. So thank you all very much.
Very good. And my special thanks to Jennifer Katz for answering a bunch of questions that I've had over the past 24, 48 hours. I appreciate your setting me straight. All right, unless there's anything else from any of the commission members, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I think, was that Commissioner McDaniels?
Coleman.
Commissioner Coleman, thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
I think that was Commissioner Mitchell. Okay, assuming there's no discussion of this, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Well, happy spring, everybody. We are finished. See you in May.
Yes, be safe. Be safe.
Thank you all.